how do we deal with this now? What do we do? We have a campaign now called Protect Nature Now. We're building a global coalition. We're mainstreaming the message. And we want to implement strict laws and regulations to protect the global microbiome. Now, the timing of our enterprise is urgent because you can now genetically engineer through gene editing microbes in your basement for price of dinner. But the timing is also amazing because of the pandemic. It has sounded the global alarm. And there is an unmet need in the population to heed its lessons. And so we have structured the film, Don't Let the Gene Out of the Bottle, which I started before the pandemic. We shifted, it was just about the microbiome. We shifted it around so that it would be receiving the wisdom and responding to the wisdom of society that had been imparted by the pandemic. So there's a big controversy about the source of the COVID-19 virus. Did it come from a bat or a pangolin, if that's the name of how to say it, or the Wuhan lab? It's a controversial issue. We don't need to pay attention to that. All we need to do is say, look at the bird flu, H5N1. The H5N1 bird flu is as much as 24 times more deadly than the COVID-19 virus. It's hard to get because you have to be around birds a lot. So it doesn't go person to person, it goes bird to person. So you have to be raising birds, they have to have the virus. And then if you get it, chances are you will pass away. 52% at one count died from the avian flu. So the death rate is enormous. Some say it's at least 24 times more deadly than the COVID-19 virus. It could be way more than that. But the safety is it doesn't transmit easily. So what did the genetic engineers do? They created an airborne version. This was such a shock to the scientific community. They said, this is crazy. I mean, can you imagine the decimation to humanity if the death rate of that virus got out? So there was a call to stop what's called the gain of function or genetic enhancement of the infectiousness or the virulence of these pathogens that can create pandemics. And in 2014, there was a law to pass that, or Obama put out a statement saying there should be no funding except under specific circumstances. And then it was removed in 2017. Now that USA Today has done their report and others have done their report, verifying that we have not at all mastered containment, that hundreds of labs and thousands of incidences have shown that even the most secure labs in the world, like the CDC lab that handles anthrax and flu, had to be shut down or admitted that they had accidental releases that could have been catastrophic. So there's no justification for testing fate. Now, this is a logical conclusion. We're all in the throes of the effects of the pandemic around the world from all these levels. And we could all imagine, or choose not to, what if it were the avian flu that was airborne? So it's an easy ask at this point. But in the film, you'll see, I say, and while we're at it, let's implement other lessons. Instead of just no enhancement of potentially pandemic pathogens, let's say no release of any GMO microbes whatsoever. And we know from the pandemic that they spread around the world, but we also know that there are certain bad actors that were nearly released that might have caused enormous, unprecedented damage. And we bring them up in the film. One is a bacterium called Klebsiella planticola. And in the 90s it was the subject of headlines because it almost got out. It was scheduled to be released. And as you'll see in the film, I'm not going to give it away, from someone who was intimately involved in it, who spoke about it at the UN, it could have theoretically ended terrestrial plant life. Ended terrestrial plant life. Then there is another bacterium, Pseudomonas syringae, which could have theoretically changed weather patterns in the world, because bacteria in the atmosphere helps create rain and ice and snow, and they had created an impotent version, which if it had escaped as planned and it had displaced its natural counterpart, those are ifs, but if it had done that, it could have changed the weather patterns. So we wake people up by these potential bad actors, but we also know that even changes in the microbiome that are subtle can mess up that brilliant intelligence. So we want to prevent the release of any genetically engineered microbes, abolish the genetic engineering enhancement of potentially pandemic pathogens, and for facilities that are using or creating GMO microbes, we want them to implement appropriate safeguards, including appropriate disposal. But we want to go further. We want to assign strict liability costs should any release occur. This gives our laws teeth, because the biotech industry would say, oh, we don't have to worry about genetically engineered microbes. There's no problem. We have it under control. But then if you say to them, well, if they're so easy, if they're so safe and so predictable, then there should be no problem if you take full responsibility for any environmental, health, or economic damage associated with an accidental release. Now they have to pay attention. Will my genetically engineered microbe be what it was supposed to be from our design of the process of gene editing? A lot of these people do not actually test the outcomes of the gene editing process. They just assume if it does what they intended to do, then the sequence is what they want. There's no collateral damage and it's available for prime time. They can release it. So they might go, well, if we're responsible for any damage, let's perhaps for the first time actually sequence the genome, sequence the RNA, look at the proteins, look at the metabolites, and see what we've created. The next question they asked was, will it get out? And if it gets out, will it mutate? How are the ways it can mutate? Can we predict that? And whether it's as designed or mutated, how will it interact in every potential ecosystem that we know about? And with the genes that we have changed, what if those genes get swapped to the different systems? Now, they don't just get exchanged with the same bacteria, they get exchanged with other microbes. And there's even, according to research this year, demonstration of horizontal gene transfer between plants and animals. And so they have to think, where will these genes go? And then if they get out, how do we monitor them? How do we clean them up? How big is our liability? Well, it doesn't take very long to watch the dollar signs go up, and they realize that their empty promises that it's safe and predictable, when they turn it into dollar signs, becomes, wait a minute, we need to rethink this as if it really matters. And what may matter to them is the money. What may matter to everyone else is our microbiome, our children's microbiome, and the microbiomes all over the planet. So we are creating white papers, legislative briefings. We have social media support for members of Congress, both at the state and federal level. We have support for media, so that we have looking to select advocates. We want to introduce bills at all levels, in all jurisdictions around the world and in international treaties. We want to recruit and train people to work with us and expand everywhere. Now, on our site, you can go to the advocacy platform. This is from there, and it brings you through 6 steps. And I guide you through with little 1 minute or 30-second videos as to what to do below. And one of the things you can do below is enter your zip code and your address, and all of a sudden, all of your elected officials, this is in the US, all of your elected officials come up. And when that happens, you get to, in a single click, send them all an email, and you can customize it. Send them a tweet, customize it, and send them a post on their Facebook page. All pre-written to give you an idea of what you can say. You can send it without changing. We recommend customizing. But in any case, now your minute or two on that platform has conveyed to your elected officials that this is important to you. And we know from elected officials who've told us that they're interested in this issue and want to see if their constituency is. So they're looking for you to respond. In the same platform, you can sign a petition that we will use around the world. You can send a press release with a little letter that's, again, you can send it as is or change it to 5 media in your area, because they all come up based on your zip code. And you can share information on your social media. So this is an advocacy platform like no other, because in 3 to 5 minutes the first time, and then 2 minutes thereafter, every time we call for a new campaign, you'll already know how to navigate. You can have 100 different actions or more. Multiply that by 10,000 activists, and now we have demonstrated overwhelming support for this issue. And that can be the motivator to have these members of Congress become champions. And we have interest on both sides of the aisle. Now, in addition to the governments, we have non-governmental policy and implementation. We want institutional review boards at universities to not allow studies that involve the release of GMO microbes. And if they involve the creation of them, they should be very carefully controlled and disposed of appropriately. We want scientific associations to step up so that they support reasonable, responsible preventive measures for all of their members. Companies to come forward, academic and research institutions, and investors to drive their investment dollars appropriately. Now, we want to build a coalition. And if you think, who should be part of this coalition? Well, let's start with climate change people. Climate change, if we just widen the lens a little bit, it becomes planetary survival. Oh, that's us, planetary survival. Think about regenerative agriculture. They want the microbiome to do the heavy lifting, to create new soil, to sequester carbon. Oh, that's us. We want to think about the animal rights people. They want to allow animals to have a healthy system and function as nature intended. Oh, that's us. Birders, gardeners, people involved with children's health, right? Health of all types, organic advocates. We're all connected to the microbiome. So if you breathe, eat, or live in something called nature, it's an issue that affects you. Now, in the nonprofit world, which I've been in for decades, people think in terms of silos, meaning this is my area. In this case, the microbiome is a foundation for many of these areas. And so we're asking different organizations, and you may be part of one, you may run one, to get the word out, not to change your focus, but just to add this as a plank to your platform. So we have over 40 official allies. We want 4,000. We want allies around the world with billions, ultimately, of members, subscribers, readers, etc., who will share our information, sometimes customizing it for their area. So we bring information for instant global movement. And we need it because we can't wait 25 years to build a movement after so many microbes have been released. So we provide materials for others to share. Like, don't let the genie out of the bottle. Please watch it and share it. And we are focusing on messaging to make it part of popular culture so that everyone understands that we have arrived at an inevitable time in human history where we can redirect the streams of evolution for all time, and that we now have the capacity to damage all living beings and all future generations. So we have a new responsibility with this technology to protect all living beings and all future generations. I was on George Norrie, Coast to Coast AM radio with George Norrie last night for a couple of hours, and someone called in and said, this is like an atom bomb. And I said, I use that analogy. I said, we wouldn't give an atom bomb to an infant and say, oh, don't press the blue button. Just don't press it, it would be bad. Everyone knows that. It is so obvious. It is so easy to understand. But in our narrow thinking in time and space and biology, we didn't have the same concern, I imagine, in 1859 when they released 24 rabbits in Australia. It was like a biological time bomb, slow motion over time, destroying or damaging an ecosystem. We want the world to understand that giving a gene editing kit to just anyone and say, here, create a new organism and release it. Create a new microbe, create a new viral sequence, create a new archaea, fungus, algae. Have at it. Change the nature of nature. GMO means God move over. Take it and run with it. If we do that, it is like a biological time bomb. We don't have that understanding yet in our civilization, but we have the capacity. So we want to convey that, and we want to convey it through curriculum and movies and books and articles and meetings and conferences, and with grassroots advocates and speakers that we will train, so that in a few years, the world knows about it, at least as much as they know about climate change, so that it becomes a fundamental of this culture, of this civilization, that we have achieved a moment that was inevitable, and it takes a new responsibility for us to safeguard biological evolution as we know it, and not destroy biological evolution as we know it. We have the capacity to do both. One of the ways that we are messaging is that we'll be teaching people about the microbiome, as I did today. Kiran Krishnan, who's an expert at the microbiome, Michelle Perro, a pediatrician, another expert, they're on board with educational information that help us love the microbiome, and we protect what we love. You probably know more about the role of the microbiome in your body today than you did before. We could talk about the amazing fecal transplant discoveries when you take fecal matter from one organism and put it into another, including humans. You can transfer disease, you can transfer health, you can transfer a tendency to gain weight, to lose weight, mood, etc. It's part of a programming that we don't understand. So we need to love and protect our microbiome and allow its intelligence to evolve and continue to express. One of the most important aspects of our movement is the ability to become big quickly. You see, we need to open an office in Brussels and work with the European Union. We need to have a presence in the UK, which is under assault from the biotech industry. We need a presence in Canada. We need a presence in China, in Africa, in South America. We need it at the international level, the national level, local level. We need training. In fact, we created an organizational chart and said, okay, if we're fully funded in the US with just one office in Europe, How much would that cost? It was millions of dollars. And I am very bold today to say this issue deserves the millions of dollars so that we have a functioning global movement. Now, in the same way that The Real Truth About Health will have a financial foundation and a few people giving, or many people giving on a regular basis to a membership, we invite you to donate to the Institute for Responsible Technology, a registered nonprofit, on some monthly basis, $5 a month, anything that you can afford. Yes, of course, we want the millionaires and the billionaires to step up and fund the whole thing, but I'm inviting you to join a team where we get to act together. We get to be the microbiome whisperers acting on their behalf, and not just the microbiome, but all living beings and all future generations. So I'm boldly asking like I've never asked, like I have had trouble asking in the past. But I feel like, why not channel nature? Why not speak on behalf of all living beings and all future generations and say, it's worth a monthly investment. And we will protect the expenditure of that money so it goes directly to changing laws and education. Because those are the two things that's needed. Now, I know for 25 years, I've been very much involved in movement building on GMO front, a different angle, focusing on educating people about the health dangers. When I started in 1996, there were no other nonprofit organizations that focused on the health dangers. So I bet on the right horse saying, no, actually the health dangers are the key to drive consumer dollars to change the entire supply chain, or as others were talking about, the environmental risks, et cetera, et cetera. And it worked. So my books, 5 movies, travels to 45 countries, it worked. We were focusing on education. We're focusing on building that up. It took 25 years. We don't have 25 years now because because gene editing has changed. Gene editing makes it so quick and easy to genetically engineer that we need to move quickly. And so we've pivoted. I will still talk about the health dangers of GMOs and Roundup. I did last night on George Norrie, but yesterday's live discussion, we did a panel discussion for Earth Day with Kiran Krishnan and Michelle Perro and Dr. Michael Antonio and Jim Thomas and I. We were focused on the microbiome because that's the new wave of information. And it turns out there is receptivity because the entire regenerative agriculture is there. All of the healthcare practitioners in functional medicine are there. All we have to do is say, we're protecting the microbiome. I see some hands raised and I will call on people in just a moment. Let me just finish up right here, tell you where you can go to help and support. And maybe some of the questions. If you go to protectnaturenow.com, you will see our advocacy platform where you'll be able to tell Congress and local officials and media and your social media. So go to the advocacy platform, watch and share the film, Don't Let the Gene Out of the Bottle, and please make a donation, ideally on a monthly basis. And there you'll also find resources. And as we invest in more staff, we can take our massive and growing library and provide it in courses and training and advocacy in a way that's easy to digest. Right now, we've just sorted it for you, and we continue to sort it every month because there's new information coming in. So please join the movement now. There is no planet B.